Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 8, 2018 Board of Education meeting. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I think, I know that it's a little snowy out, so I think we want to try to get people out as quickly as we can, but I do want to start with moving up, with the board's permission, the item 9.3, just to highlight this item. We've received a letter from the High School Building Committee asking the Board of Education to accept the Guilford High School project as final so that they can close it and submit their final grant application to the state of Connecticut. I think actually I should, with your indulgence, I'll read the letter because I think I really want to highlight just what an outstanding project this was. This is a letter from Mary Beeman, Bob Jacob, Larry Marsick, Margaret Molnar Ryan, Bill Mulligan, Scott Orenstein, Guido Petra, and Todd Williams. Now, there have been a lot of other people, not the least of whom was Scott Pinkney, who chaired that committee for a long part of it. But they write, "We are delighted to ask that the Board of Education formally accept the Guilford High School building project is complete. All bills have been paid, punch list completed, and contract obligations fulfilled. The High School Building Committee first gathered in 2011 to fulfill the voters' request that we build a new state-of-the-art high school with an overall budget of $92.2 million. We're enormously proud of our collaboration with the Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, Board of Finance, other town department officials, Principal Rick Masenti, and the extremely talented and passionate staff at Guilford High School. The project was delivered on time and under budget. The end result is an exceptional learning environment that the town should be proud of for decades to come. As you know, the formal acceptance of the project is the milestone step of beginning the closeout of the project. Upon its resolution accepting the project as complete, the Board of Ed can submit the final grant application, which will trigger the closeout of the project by the state. We feel confident that we have completed a quality project and know that the Board of Education will give it the best possible care." So, and I do want to just highlight the approved amount was $92.2 million. The final number, they spent almost $2 million less than that. It came in at about $90,540,000 was the final. So the rest will just not be bonded, not be spent. So this is a very exciting development. Everybody involved, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, the Building Committee kept their promises. And so I would entertain a motion, if you will, that we accept the request of the High School Building Committee and accept this building.
So moved. Second.
Is there any other discussion? I'm sure with our deep appreciation to the Building Committee and to the other town boards. Any other comments on that? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, and I know we've thanked them before, but I think it might be maybe a good idea to send another follow-up letter.
Already drafted, going out tomorrow.
Excellent.
This is very exciting news.
Yes. All right, let's go to the student representatives, if everybody doesn't mind. Get you all out of here. What can you tell us is happening in our schools?
Okay, so at Melissa Jones, the faculty is working on a rigorous task and which incorporates like leverage practices and the 21st century skills that they've been working on. And so in January during the meeting, they worked on developing instructional tasks for either the ELA, math, social studies, and giving each other feedback so that they can have new skills in working with the students. In the 3rd and 4th grade, they performed a winter concert with recorders, songs, and dance on they will be performing this concert on January 19th, and some students have been getting some extra practice by coming in at 8:30 in the morning before school starts to work with the music teacher. Also, the school is planning an ice skating party on January 15th at the North Ford Pavilion, which parents can pre-register for, and it's through the PTO. At Guilford Lakes, they will also be participating in the ice skating party, also on January 15th. They will also be hosting a movie night on January 26th through the PTO. The PTO also sponsored a Brazilian music and dance group in which the students were entertained by 3 artists who played instruments and danced different dances representing the Brazilian culture, and this was in December. Students also participated in an academic scavenger hunt and solved problems that led them to various places throughout the building. And currently, the pre-K and kindergarten are learning about seasonal changes and have been making snowflakes.
Tell them to make something else.
At Calvin Leet, the 4th grade students completed their child labor literacy unit by writing an opinion about whether or not to buy products from a country that supports child labor. In 3rd grade, students culminated research on ocean animals by writing a comprehensive report that includes information from their sources. And in art, 2nd grade, students were practicing symmetry and measurement while drawing snowflakes. And in music, 3rd and 4th grade students are preparing for their winter concert, which will be held on January 23rd. And then at A.W. Cox, the students have the winter community dinner coming up on January 11th. And second graders have been working on the Blizzard Blast Science Project, in which they have applied their knowledge of motion and force to build and test catapults. 3rd graders have been learning about the composition of poems and are working on writing their own poems about a family tradition. And lastly, 4th graders have been working throughout December with fractions using different tools and different techniques.
And from Baldwin Middle School, on Tuesday, December 19th, they received a visit from the Guilford High School Voices, which we were pleased to hear that they very highly enjoyed, and they're looking forward to them next year. On December 22nd, the student annual Cocoa Cafe was held, where students played in the cafeteria as their peers got cocoa and cookies. Some upcoming music concerts. The chorus concert will be on January 18th for Baldwin Middle School, and the band and orchestra concerts will be held on January 24th. The PTO has partnered with Baldwin Middle School to show the film Screenagers, which describes the role and impact of the technology in teenagers' lives. And they will also hold a evening showing of the film for all those interested in late January. And from Adams Middle School, the 7th grade band and the jazz band will have a concert this Wednesday. The Adams PTO is sponsoring a local artist, Daniela Balzano, to paint a series of mandalas along the ramps in the hallways. And this will include images from all the students that have created them in their classes, and the artist has promised to incorporate each one of these images into the giant mural that's going to that, and they're looking forward to that very highly.
Okay, so at Guilford High School, winter sports have started, and we have some teams that are off to a pretty good start, including hockey, which is currently 4-1, boys hockey. Fencing is doing really well as well. I believe the girls are undefeated. Girls basketball is currently 4-2, and they're playing Mercy tonight. Our boys basketball team is currently 5-0, and they defeated Madison over this past weekend, and they also have a game tonight against Lyman Hall. And Wesleyan is also doing really well with 3 wins in their bag.
IB has been very exciting and challenging throughout the first semester. We've had 2 extended essay meetings, and students have presented guidelines for writing the extended essay in particular subjects to their peers. And finally, from IB, students produced, directed, and performed in Greek tragedies in front of other high school students, and it was very successful, as well as nerve-wracking. And today, Dr. Freeman and Dr. Kanapari met with sports teams captains and student class officers to discuss later start times. The concerns and questions of students were addressed, and it was very exciting to see the conversation and science behind later start times being spread.
And more news at the high school. Midterms will begin the week of the 15th. And just recently, there was a student-teacher basketball game in which Mr. Masseni, who unfortunately could not be here, but he wanted everyone to know that he led the students to a victory over the staff. And so everybody enjoyed that game and watched it with a lot of excitement. So that's all the news from Guilford High School.
Terrific. Any questions, comments? All right. Well, I guess you're relieved, if you will, excused. Drive really
carefully.
slowly. Huh. Are you concerned about anything in particular?
Yeah.
On that note, there's an accident on Long Hill Road, so if you can avoid it.
Okay.
Thank you.
School sign. Thank you. But drive very slowly.
Yes.
Tell him to text when he gets home.
What?
Tell him to text you when he gets home.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What's embarrassing right now?
So, and Ms. Beckett approached me before the meeting. She would has something that would ordinarily come up under item 11, which is going to be probably an hour and a half from now. And she asked if she could come up now and address us on a topic, and I thought that was probably fair.
Sure, of course.
Good evening, everyone. Boy, the faces have really changed on the Board of Ed since I was last here. My name is Kim Beckett. I do know some of you, but not all. I am a Guilford resident, and I have a son who is 23 years old who went through Guilford Public Schools receiving special education services. I know tonight is your budget night, and I hope not to take too much of your time, but I am very excited to share with you and your GCTV viewers that partnering with Dr. Freeman and Director of Pupil Services Jenny Brown, Guilford has started a special education PTO. Our mission for this town-wide SEPTO is to create collaborative relationships between Guilford Public Schools, families of individuals with disabilities, and the community through support, education, and empowerment. We have 5 goals. Bear with me. Our goals promote high-quality education for children with disabilities by providing families with information, training, resources, and support. We provide a network of resources through guest speakers, workshops, and shared information on related topics from pre-K through transition. We empower families to navigate the special education system through an understanding of Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We advocate for children with disabilities and their right to a free and appropriate education in least restrictive environment through an open dialogue with our legislators, Guilford Public Schools Board of Education, and the community. And last, we foster and support the spirit of inclusion in academic, social, and recreational settings by elevating the community's awareness and acceptance of all children of varying abilities. Guilford SEPTO was just created 3 months ago. We've had 3 meetings all total. Our first meeting, we voted in our bylaws and voted in our officers. At the second meeting, Jason Scanziano gave a brilliant presentation to our parents about the in-district programs offered here in Guilford. And I think that there were a number of younger parents in attendance, and they walked away with a wonderful, comforting feeling that this district was going to take care of their kids. In the next meeting, we had Dr. Freeman come to us and talk about the budget. And again, I think our parents walked out with a much better understanding of the multiple steps that are involved to get to a referendum. On January 22nd, we will host State Senator Ted Kennedy Jr. and State Representative Sean Scanlon. And although we do know this is the first night of your public forums, you can still join us. The meeting's going to be right here in the Guilford High School Library from 6 to 7:30. And I know your public forum doesn't start until 7 at Adams, so we'll give you plenty enough time to scoot on down there. So please join us. And actually looking to the future, we would love to have a regular presence of the Board of Education. Perhaps maybe you could rotate and come to a couple of our meetings just to get a good feel for us. We typically hold our meetings on the 3rd Monday of the month, but for January and February, obviously with the holidays, there is an exception where we have to go to the 4th. We will soon have a website with information. In the meantime, I believe that Jenny Brown is either in the process of posting some information or will be. And on behalf of the parents who helped to launch Guilford SEPTO, many of them are here tonight, I want to thank Superintendent Freeman and Director of Pupil Services Jenny Brown for their cooperative spirit to launch this. I have to tell you, this has been a personal goal of mine for over 10 years. I want to see parents and teachers and administrators be able to come together with a better understanding of what role each has in the success of the child and the student. Dr. Freeman and Jenny and their staff have been very enthusiastic and helpful to get us up and running, and we just want to express our appreciation and again invite you to our next meeting on January 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Ms. Beckett, could you just tell us what time the usual meetings are, the third Monday of the month?
6 to
Oh,
7:30.
they are. Okay, so that does conflict with our Board of Ed meetings, unfortunately. Usually.
No, third Monday.
Third, so we, I got it, yeah.
Oh, third would be okay.
Fourth, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
For the finance.
Okay, yeah.
You know.
No, that's good. Good.
Okay, good.
All are welcome.
Are they all going to be at the
for you.
high school?
Thank you.
Are they
Yes, they've all been
All
here.
here, in the library.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
So having done that, I guess I should invite anybody else in the public that wants to either do a comment on the board agenda, item 4, or a question, item 11. Come on up. If you just give us your name and street.
I'm Jay Carlson, and my question is to Kim. If I am a new parent and want to be a part of this, what is my best way to be contacted with information that is upcoming? Should I email?
Yes, Mrs. Carlson.
Thank you.
You can email me, you can email Jenny Brown, you can call us. Again, once that information is on the website, we've pretty much all of the officers have posted our names, our email addresses, and our cell phone numbers. So anybody can reach us.
Anybody
I
can
do know
contact
that-
Jenny Brown or me as well. We're happy to direct them your way.
Yeah. And I do know that Ginny Brown and Dr. Freeman and yourself have created a listserv that includes those from the special ed arena, but those that are outside of that special ed arena and would like to benefit from some of what we bring to the table might want to.
They just need to reach out to us and
Right.
tell us what their email address is, and then they will get all of the communication that goes out.
I'd like to suggest maybe that it's easy to find Dr. Freeman's email, given that it's on our website. So if they just go to guilfordschools.org and go to the superintendent's page and email him, and he can forward it to you. That would
Terrific.
Absolutely.
That would be
Happy
the
to do
easiest
that.
That
way
would
to
be
do it.
great.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, let's, shall we go back to the agenda, which is completely shredded at this point, but that's okay. We're on 3.1, I think, the December 11, 2017 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Changes, corrections, additions, clarifications? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then December 18, 2017, special meeting, this related to the energy contract, as I recall, right? And is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Any changes, corrections, clarifications? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Item 4, I think we've already done that. Anybody, public forum for topics on the board agenda? No? Dr. Balistraci, you had the expenditures for the month of December. And
I did. So the expenditures for the month of December were $4,527,034.44. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of December were 44.11% of the budget as compared to 43.99% in the prior year. We did go over the warrant in detail in the operations meeting that happened immediately prior to this meeting, but certainly I can open up to any questions or discussion if any of the board members wants to follow up.
Any questions?
No, you addressed everything during the operations committee.
So then is that a motion to
It
approve
is
the
a-
expenditures
it's-
in the amount of whatever that is?
Yes, $4,527,034.44 with warrants at $1,938.51,
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Communications, anybody have anything that we are not likely to talk about moving forward under the budget discussion? It was pretty quiet, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been quiet around the break and all those days off.
All right, so let's get to the budget, shall we?
I'll just move to the podium for
As
this.
you wish. Sure.
Board's permission. So this is the one time a year that I take to the podium for a presentation. As the board is well aware, we have been working on building this budget since we returned to school in September. We have met with the board has met with the leadership team. We have hosted one public comment to date, and the leadership team and the business office have been working diligently preparing this draft budget that we are happy to present and share with you this evening. As always, I would like to ask for a little bit of time to set context. This year at Convocation, we began the year with a children's book. We began the year talking about the environment that we build for our children. This year, every teacher has received a notepad with this quote from that children's book on the notepad. And many of the public presentations that we have shared this year have built around this image of the ripple. Each and everything that we do goes out like a ripple into the world. In fact, at Convocation, when we returned, teachers shared stories about how they have impacted the lives of students. We spend much of our year talking about budgets. We spend a lot of energy talking about the resources that go into a budget and budget preparation. But ultimately, a budget is a value document. Where we place our dollars, where we marshal our resources, says something about what we believe. It says something about how we treat education. It says something about how we value our children in this district. And so as we move forward with this budget, we tried hard to remember that every decision we make was one of those ripples going out into this system. Our budget builds from a vision and a mission. The vision and the mission in Guilford Public Schools have been stable for some time. As the board is aware, however, we began talking about the vision and revisiting the vision just in our last retreat. The leadership team has taken up that mantle. We are beginning to look at the vision, and I think this is an appropriate venue to let the community know that visions need to be revisited periodically, and we are beginning the process of revisiting the vision. What is it that we see? Where do we want the Guilford Public Schools to be? What do we see for our children in the Guilford Public Schools? This is where we start. And each year in the Guilford Public Schools, we revisit our priorities. I am enormously proud that these three priorities, while they have evolved and while we have wordsmithed these priorities, they have stayed essentially unchanged, although they have grown over the last 7 years. Priority 1 speaks to the rigorous instructional environment that we expect to create for our children every day. It speaks to what we want our classrooms to be. We want to invite our students to grapple with their own learning, and to do that, we need to create rigorous tasks that are supported by standards, that are integrated with our principles of learning, that we measure rigorously and continuously, and that we support as we move forward. That's what we want for our students. In order to provide that, we have to think about priority 2, and that speaks to the professional environment that we intend to create for our teachers in this system. In order for our teachers to be able to create that environment in priority 1, they need to be appropriately supported and resourced by principals, by leaders in the building who are in fact instructional leaders themselves, by coaches and specialists who understand instruction in their subject areas, by each other and dynamic professional learning communities, and with the appropriate level of resources and materials that they require. And ultimately, neither one of those can happen if we don't create a safe and comforting environment where students are valued for who they are, and where children and adults both feel free to take academic and intellectual risks. These have been our priorities, and it's been interesting to look back to see how we worded these in 2011 to how they have been worded today. The language has evolved, but the meaning has only deepened. It has not changed or drifted, which is exciting to see. Each year, then, those broad priorities turn into specific initiatives, specific measurable areas that we want to focus our energy. This current school year, we are focusing those energies around strengthening those professional learning communities that I just mentioned, recognizing that teachers are the best levers of their own professional development. Teachers learn best from their peers. Teachers learn best using the real environment with the real students in which they work every day, and we need to focus on those as the levers of professional learning. We want to continue to extend our mastery of just 3 high-leverage instructional practices, practices that we know are effective and that cut across grade level or subject matter, instructional practices that kindergarten teachers can talk to their high school colleagues about because they know that these practices leverage learning for students. Those are ensuring that we create opportunities for facilitating academically productive talk. And that's not just talk between a teacher and a student. It's talk between and among the students themselves in the classroom. It's providing opportunities to provide effective and actionable feedback. And again, not just from a teacher on a report card or on an assignment to a student, but between and among students. And leveraging writing as an opportunity to learn, not just as a measure of learning at the end of a subject. We've been focusing on these 3 strategies for the last year. This is our 2nd year with this intensive focus, and you heard Dorcas reference that work at Jones when she spoke about the recent professional development at Jones Elementary School this past month. We know this year that we need to focus on our STEM instruction. We've been talking about math for multiple years here in district, and this year with a new focus on the next generation science standards, we deepen that focus into the subject, the science areas, and we've been talking more about technology and engineering opportunities as well. We know that that's an area that requires continued focus. We want to continue to look at our assessment system. How do we balance and measure whether our students are learning? How do we balance those measures with the actual learning? We are not a highly assessed school district. We don't stop instruction to do universal assessments often, but when we do, it's important. You know that we care about the Smarter Balanced Assessment. You know that we care about the SAT scores. We use those measures to leverage systemic change in learning moving forward. How do we balance that with the more informal systems that take place in the classrooms? And finally, maybe the center ripple once again, we want to focus this year on enhancing the climates within our schools to be more globally and culturally aware and not just tolerant but accepting. With the launch of IB this year, we felt that that was enormously important. And as we continue to look at student health and wellness concerns around stress and anxiety, this bullet continues to be one that draws our attention. From the district-wide mission and vision and priority, every year we remind ourselves that there are certain assumptions when we go into a budget build. First, every decision we make needs to lean towards that healthy, safe, and supportive school environment. We will not make decisions that are counter to healthy, happy children. We want to make the right decisions. That's the first piece. We start with the kids. The second, right on the heels of that, is we're about instruction. We are a public school system. We have a dogged focus on instruction, and every dollar that we spend needs to support our instructional mission. This year specifically, again, focusing on those high leverage practices, strengthening our PLCs, and looking to STEM instruction. I say this every year, but I don't believe that my job in the Guilford Public Schools, I don't believe I was invited to join this community to keep things as they are. Despite the fact that we are an exceptionally successful school district, we can be better every year. We should be better every year, and that means extending and improving opportunities for all students. Every year we look at how we can be better than we were the year before. And finally, we don't intend to do that simply by asking for more. We believe that it is our job, it is our responsibility as stewards of this system, as members of this community, to first look at existing resources and try to find creative and resourceful ways to repurpose, reuse, or reallocate the existing resources before we ask for more resources. We never come to you with a budget that simply layers more on top. We hope every year to bring to you a budget that is responsive to our needs and our concerns. And then getting down to the real nitty-gritty, that budget builds on the students who come through our doors every year. So this year, we are projecting that we will see, again, a slight decline in student enrollment. We are projecting that should we bring in the same size pre-kindergarten and kindergarten classes that we've experienced across the last several years, but graduating out a slightly larger high school senior class, that we will see a reduction of approximately 72 students across the district. That being said, I want to show you the visual. We've been projecting significant declines in our student enrollment every year for the last 7 years, and we're not realizing those projections. Last year we projected a decline of approximately 100 students, and we didn't recognize that decline. There was a small drop, but it wasn't what we projected. In fact, the demographic study that we commissioned some years ago shows that we should be opening our doors next year at 3,112 students. We know that we're not going to be at that level. We believe we're going to be at 3,290, and in fact, I think we're going to be a little north of that. We have been every year as we've made these projections. We should have been on a steep decline for the last several years. Something changed around 14 or 15, and our enrollment really began to level off, and I believe it's going to continue to stay relatively level compared to other local districts. So we build from a mission. We have an instructional focus and priorities, and the budget we request this year then comes in at $60,169,175. That is an increase of $1,519,039 over the current budget. It's a percent increase of 2.59%. To put that in some context, with one exception, that is the lowest initial budget that the leadership team has ever brought to the Board of Education in my time here in the district. Last year, we brought you an initial starting budget of 1.99%. That was ultimately reduced to a 1.28 before its acceptance. This is the second lowest budget that has ever come to the board at this time. We will have weeks of deliberation. There are obviously places that we can discuss where to make changes, but this is the history of increases that we've seen in Guilford. I will note that school year 16-17 involved 2 referenda that did not pass for both school and town budgets before we ultimately settled at the 0.69% increase that you see there. Each year, we start by trying to focus on those efficiencies. We mentioned that one of our budget assumptions is that we repurpose, reuse existing resources effectively and creatively, we hope. So I like to start by highlighting some of those areas of efficiencies. Salaries are the single largest portion of our school budget. This is a people-intense business. The teachers who teach in the classrooms, the administrators who manage the buildings, the clerical staff, the custodial staff, the kitchen staff who support our children each and every day in all things that they do, the nurses who work to keep them healthy and safe. It's about the people in the schools. Our contracted average salary increase falls at approximately 3% this year. But you will see that the actual salary line itself increases by only about 1.7%. We have worked very hard to have the right people in the right places, but to control that salary growth. We have negotiated, I think, fair but reasonable contracts with all of our parties. The Board of Education, all of you have sat through those negotiations. You know how hard we have worked to reach fair agreements with the teachers who work in this district, with all of the other support personnel who work in this district. But beyond just those contracts, we also work to restructure FTEs in this district. We are meeting needs in some areas by reducing staffing in others, not asking for new staff where it's not needed, and by hiring thoughtfully, carefully, and creatively. We oftentimes are able to find talent that wants to join the Guilford Public Schools, and we can do that at an experience level that is lower than we have sometime budgeted, creating further savings in that line. Tuition is an efficiency this year. You know that some of our students, some of our special educational students have needs that we can't necessarily meet here in our schools, and so some of our special education students are outplaced to more specialty schools, to private schools. We have some students who take advantage of magnet or VOAG opportunities. Tuition has been a focus over the last several years, and tuition, in fact, is a cost that is being reduced this year, significantly reduced this year. So we'll detail that a little bit further for you. And supplies and materials, while they make up a relatively small portion of our budget, they are one of the most discretionary areas. Our principals and our teachers have worked very hard to be very careful about the expenditures in those areas, and I have an exhibit of that I'd like to show you this year that I've not used in past years. But first, I'd like to highlight that tuition line. I'd like to highlight special education. You heard Mrs. Beckett talk about the work that has been done in special education over the last several years. I know that's a confusing slide to look at. The blue line that you see are the budgeted dollar amounts for special education. And you'll note that in 2013-14, there was a year that we made a significant move to bring services into district, to reduce outplacements, and we expected a significant reduction in spending. You can see that in 13-14, we had the right ideas, but we were overly ambitious. We didn't see our actual spending, which is the red line, decrease to the degree that we thought that our budgeted spending would. However, if you do look at the red line, what you will see is that this year's proposed budget, the school year 18-19, is coming in at 12-13 levels for our budgeted expenditures in the areas of tuition, transportation, and contracted services for our special education students. It is a volatile line. It is difficult to predict. But if you look at that red line over the last several years, you can see that we have very much controlled spending. In fact, Mr. Hoey always asks for us to include this line. If we had not changed the rate of increase that we were on in special education spending, we would be looking at spending at approximately $7 million this year if that growth had continued the way it was. We this year are budgeting approximately $4,200,000 in these three lines. We're very proud of the work that we've done in special education, not because it has reduced costs, but because we believe it has improved programming for these students. And in the bargain, we have been able to control the costs along the way. We mentioned supplies and materials. We haven't broken this out for you during this presentation. You've always had this information in your budget books, but this year we wanted to highlight for you budget by location, looking at our 7 building locations and special education facilities and technologies as cost areas. What you're going to see there is that in almost every location, we're flat or showing reductions in the spending in those areas. There are 2 exceptions that I'll draw your eye to. One is at Leet. Leet Elementary School is the only school location that is seeing an increase in spending that isn't either flat or a reduction. And that's because of real enrollment increases. You know that we had an influx of students into the 3rd grade at Leet. We had 2 sections at Leet that were sitting comfortably in the teens, grow to both being at 23 and 24 students this year because we had 10 students move into the 3rd grade at Leet Elementary School over the last school year. And Leet this year is experiencing the largest kindergarten enrollment of any of our elementary schools, with the 3 largest kindergarten classes this year. So Leet sees a slight increase for their local spending. Everybody else is a reduction. I draw your attention to facilities because I want to note that the 11% increase there includes money for the Board of Education's portion of the turf replacement at our original turf field here at the high school. If that dollar amount were to be backed out, we would be looking at a 1.3% increase in facilities, essentially flat as well. In technology, I do want to note that's not a decrease because we're cutting back. In fact, we're recognizing that decrease in the year that we have issued one-to-one Chromebooks to every student in the school district. The reason for the decrease is that we have been able to move one of our larger leases off, and we've picked up a smaller lease this year, and yet we continue to provide the technology that our students and teachers need in the classroom to do the sort of work that we expect them to be able to do. Our principals and our teachers have worked very hard to control spending in all of these areas. But in addition to efficiencies, every year is going to have non-discretionary cost increases, cost drivers that are simply unavoidable. There are the realities of doing business every year that drive our budget. Salaries every year is identified as an efficiency and as a cost driver. While we are incredibly proud of the work that we've done to maintain or control costs in the salary line, again, we have to recognize that salary is the single largest expenditure we have, and even a small increase in that line is going to represent a large increase overall. So while your salary increase floats around 1.7%, it represents a dollar increase of $600,000 this year to meet the contractual obligations, to continue to maintain the class sizes, to continue to offer the services that we offer currently in the Guilford Public Schools. This is the salary increase that this budget demands. Last year, we reduced our medical expenses by $500,000. We moved our largest bargaining unit, the teachers unit, into HSAs, into health savings accounts. We recognized a real savings. But this year, as medical costs continue to increase, without the opportunity to restructure our program this year, we're recognizing a medical increase of a significant amount at $456,000. The capital increase I just mentioned, including the turf field, which represents $300,000 of that figure, that facilities increase this year, the capital increase is $328,000. That does not include bonded requests. I will speak to those under a separate slide shortly. And I know that we talked about this during our operations meeting, but it bears repeating here. We are coming to the end of a 5-year contract with our transportation company. It is the end of a particularly favorable contract that we secured with our transportation company 5 years ago. Public transportation is a statutorily required component of a public education. We must provide busing services to our students. We put our busing contract out to a competitive public bid this year, and we are anticipating a 20% increase in our busing costs. We have been below market value for several years now. This is a cost correction. It's a market correction. And we anticipate an increase of over $300,000 in transportation spending this year. That alone represents a 0.5% increase, 0.5% increase in our overall budget. And special education services, now these costs are bundled in with the tuition and transportation costs on the visual slide that I showed you. But while tuition is dropping, the services that we provide to students in-house that sometimes exceed our ability continue to increase. So when we bring in additional behavioral support, or when we bring in additional expert support from the outside to support the work of our teachers with our students here in district, that falls under special services, and that is increasing by $153,000 this year. These 5 items together represent a $1.8 million increase. I want to remind you that the total budget request this year is only increasing by 1.5. So while these 5 drivers are driving a $1.8 million increase, we've worked very hard to offset those costs wherever we could and only bring you a budget that increases by the $1.5 million in total that we show here. So there are efficiencies, there are unavoidable non-discretionary cost increases, and then there are the investments that we want to make. And this goes back to one of those budget assumptions, that we're not simply here to continue what we've done, but to enhance and to be better next year than we are this year. We have never brought you a budget that simply treads water. So this year, in addition to the cost drivers, we do have investments that we are requesting. This budget in front of you includes the addition of 2 music FTEs at the elementary level. When we met with the leadership team early this school year, I think it was still October, you heard the elementary principals talk about their desire to increase both art and music contact time at the elementary level. During our public hearings, you heard parents come out and talk about increasing art staffing. It's important to note, however, that when we look at our state numbers, when we look at recommended contact time and actual contact time, we fall below the state recommended contact time in both art and music. We're further below the state recommended level in music than we are in art. I did not feel comfortable building in an increase of 4 FTEs to increase both art and music this year. We needed to make a decision, working with the principals, knowing that the music staff and community have been requesting this increase for the last 4 or 5 years, while there was also a public voice to increase art staffing. We're making the decision this year to include music increases in our schedule, and we will continue to look at art and may have recommendations in future budget years to increase art contact time as well. This budget includes the increase of 1 assistant coaching position, specifically in our crew team. Crew is one of the most highly enrolled in sports that we offer here at the high school. It's an unusual sport to offer here at the high school. We also have requests to increase coaching positions in football, in fencing, in baseball. Again, we can't do all of it every year. The crew team has been asking for this position for a number of years. Both Mr. Jarvis and Mr. Macenti believe that this is the right place to look at enhancing the coaching staff and the capital increases that we spoke of. Specifically, this budget includes $300,000 to replace the turf on our original turf field. We know that we just opened a second turf field last year. Our original turf field, however, is beyond its useful life for the carpet. The infrastructure is solid. A turf field is not a permanent installation. Usually the carpet has an 8 to 10 year life. I believe we're at 10 or 12 years on our carpet. The town has offered to cover half of that cost. So the cost that we have included in the capital line is for half of the cost to replace that turf field. And then while this is not new, to me this is the heart of this budget. We have worked long and hard to improve performance in this district. I have talked, Mr. Bloss has talked publicly about the return on investment that we get in our schools. There is an 8-minute video on our website that talks about the return that we get for the investment that we make in the Guilford Public Schools. I honestly believe that the reason for such a return is that we have focused on a few core items year over year, and we haven't allowed our focus or our attention to move year after year. This budget continues the support of the instructional coaching model, of the International Baccalaureate program that we have launched this year, of the special education capacity building that we have focused on for the past 6 years, and on core instruction for every student. By focusing on those high-leverage instructional practices and the professional learning communities as hothouses for teacher learning, we will continue to get that return on our investment. And this is the single most important investment that this budget makes. So to break those out for you, we are talking about increasing contact time for every elementary student from 30 minutes a week to 60 minutes a week. We can accomplish this with 2 positions district-wide. Athletics, we're talking about 1 assistant coaching stipend. Capital, we're talking about approximately $300,000 for our half of the turf replacement cost. And I mentioned that we would speak about bonding requests this year as well. You know that we put together a 10-year capital calendar. You know that we have recently approved a performance contract that will help to offset these costs. But we also know that we currently have significant heating, ventilation, and air conditioning concerns in a number of our buildings. That has been made very clear to us over this last week in a number of our buildings. Currently, Baldwin Middle School is still running the original HVAC system from its build back in the mid-70s. We had challenges with that system last year. We deferred this request last year to hold off for a year, but there's significant work required in the heating, ventilation, and cooling system at Baldwin Middle School for over $2 million. Melissa Jones has additional HVAC needs, and that would make a request for approximately $3.7 million of new bonding for this year that we would recommend so that we could do that work going forward. Because we have a 10-year calendar, we're also showing you what we have scheduled that would be upcoming work for the following summer, the summer of 19. Cox has HVAC needs as well. There are windows that need replacing at Melissa Jones, and that would be approximately a $2.5 million bond request as well. I would think that as we move into our deliberations, we should look carefully at the debt service calendar that the town is currently carrying, but we should consider 3 possibilities. We should consider whether any of these requests need to be pushed back, and we avoid making a bonding request this year. I'm not going to be recommending that option. We should look at whether or not we request simply what is needed for the most immediate work at Baldwin and Melissa Jones and request approximately a $3.7 million bond, but that might lead us to have to return to the taxpayers next year for an additional bond, or whether we consider making a total 2-year request of approximately $6.3 million. This would allow us to be able to plan for the HVAC projects at Baldwin, Jones, and Cox all this year and not come forward with any bonding request to the town next year. Linda has prepared an exhibit, and again, it's in your books, I believe. If it's not in your books, it's in your folder from tonight's meeting. I think as we make that deliberation and as we discuss these possibilities, we need to look very carefully at the debt service calendar that the town is carrying right now. We are still taking on debt from paying for this high school. So while it's exciting to sign the document that accepts the building is finished, doesn't mean we're done paying for it. So I think we need to be thoughtful as we consider these bonding requests moving forward. And then I just want to remind the board what the impact has. This budget is built on staffing. We are a people-intensive operation. The biggest impact we make every year to our budget is by changing the staffing. So the overall staffing increase this year shows an increase in our employee population of 3.5 positions. There are 3 teacher positions. There are the 2 music positions that I talked about, and there is a classroom position at LEAT that has been requested both by the parents at LEAT and by the principal at LEAT, Mr. Grimm, because of those 3rd grade class sizes that I referenced earlier. Our average elementary class size in this district is and has been approximately 18.5 over the last few years, but third graders at LEAT are currently in classes of 23 and 24. So by increasing our teaching staff by 3, we would be providing elementary music or increasing elementary music at the elementary levels and addressing that bubble in the elementary classroom positions. This is built on an assumption that kindergarten classes come in at the same rate that they have over the last several years. As I do every year, I will assure you that should kindergarten enrollment be lower, that we would not fill positions that are unnecessary, but this would be the staffing request at this time. The paraprofessional request at Cox is to level Cox. When Cox was an elementary school that had significantly lower enrollment than the others, it had office staffing of 1.0. There was one full-time secretary for 10 months a year at Cox. All of the other elementary schools over the last several years, as they have grown, have increased to 1.5. There's a full-time clerical position and a 0.5 para to support that position. We're requesting that at Cox to bring them up to the level of staffing that you see at every other building. There's no custodial increase request this year. There's no administrative increase request this year. I will note that over the last several years, we've made moves to grow a number of our 10-month administrative positions into 12-month administrative positions. The last such change was accomplished in this budget that we're in this year. We have no request to either increase the number of administrators or the scheduling of administrative staff this year. It's a total increase of 3.5. And obviously, your deliberations moving forward, I expect we'll be talking more about these new positions. Ultimately, this budget, as last year's budget, is focused on continuing the work that we're doing. We're not launching a new program like IB. We're not providing an expanded service like full-day kindergarten. We are continuing to do the work that we've done, and we expect to do it well and at a very high level. And I'll just close on that comment on return on investment. By any measure, Guilford students perform exceptionally well. If you look at any of the standardized ratings or rankings, you will find Guilford schools, Guilford School District, Guilford High School being recognized as the top in the DIRG, the top in the state. We're in the top 10, we're in the top 20. When you look at our students, whether it's on standardized testing, state accountability measures, college placements, their performance on this stage in this building or on the athletic fields, I'd put our kids up against any other school district in the state. And at the same time, we are spending between $400 and $500 per student above the state average. If we were ranked by spending, we'd be 80th or 90th in the state. But when you measure us by performance, the top 20, top 15, top 10, sometimes we're the highest performing district in the state, depending on what measure we're talking about. We get an enormous return on our investment because we're a school district that is nestled in a community that cares about education, that is committed to their kids, and that allows us to do the work that we know we need to do by resourcing us to an appropriate level. I have appreciated that support. I'm excited to continue to discuss this budget moving forward. I know that there will be changes, but we're proud to bring it to you at this point here this evening. And while I know we have weeks to do this, we can start the conversation tonight.
Yeah, well, let me ask Mr. Kazin. I know he's got the timeline pulled up here, so why don't I just ask you to just say what the timeline is, what the next scheduled meetings are.
Sure. Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 16th, there's a joint meeting with the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance. And on next Thursday, there's a Board of Ed meeting with the district leadership team.
Location on that one has been moved. If I could note, that's been moved to here out of Baldwin. Baldwin had a conflict with a student concert. We didn't want to displace the kids.
Thank you. And the Board of Ed, Board of Finance meeting on Tuesday, do you know the location?
That will likely be at the community center.
Very good. And then we have a public hearing on Monday, the 22nd on the budget, and on Tuesday, the 23rd. Both of those are at the Adams Chorus Room at 7:30. And on the 29th, we have a special meeting here to vote on the budget and the proposed bonding. So there's several meetings in January.
As there always are. So, no, we can certainly start talking about this tonight, we can maybe just flag some items that we would like some more information on.
Yep.
Ask Dr. Freeman and the rest of the group to try to gather for us. Whatever folks want to do.
I just had a question. This is not an answer that we need tonight or even very soon, but regarding the turf replacement, I would just like to know what, if we decide not to put that investment out this year, what, are we, is this field completely over its time? Are we going to cause problems next year if we don't do it?
No, it's not at the it's not at the point that either Jake or I would recommend taking it offline, but it's getting to the point that we need to begin thinking about replacing it. It's like your roof. When your roof makes it to the end of the useful life, do you keep trying to squeeze an extra year out of it, or do you go ahead and make that replacement? The town has not approved their budget yet. If the town doesn't put their half of the monies in this year's budget, then this would be a reduction that we would logically make. But I wanted to have it in here as a beginning point and as a conversation point. No, the field is not offline. I don't believe it's imminent that it will come offline, but it's something we need to begin discussing.
And is this the same material that we used on the new turf field?
So that would be a question. No, this field was built, this is an older field. This field was built with a rubber infill. It's not built with a sand, an acrylic sand infill. It lacks the shock pad that is under the acrylic. Right, so the rubber itself is more forgiving than the acrylic fill, but the acrylic fill is built on what's called a shock pad underneath. We would have to explore whether we were going to replace it with existing materials or whether we would be able to replace it with the same materials that we have in the new field. This was the figure that the town asked us to carry. We haven't started those conversations about what options this affords for us.
I think this is a fair thing to talk with the Board of Finance about.
Great topic for that.
Both the concept and the, because I'm just going to, there's nobody's recollection to refresh because I'm the only one left from 2006. But the deal originally was that this was a town project. Yes. And the deal was that the town funded the installation of it in 2006, and it was approved. It was done by town referendum, not Board of Education vote, or a town special meeting, not a Board of Education vote. And the Standing Building Committee had authority over it. And I predicted in 2006 that there was going to be mission creep, and in fact there was mission creep. Now, 10 years later, I'm not saying that's unfair or that it's fair. This would be the only field that the Board of Education participates in.
Correct.
Creating and managing. Every other field in town is under the jurisdiction of the Standing Buildings Committee, which is or Standing Fields Committee, which is a Board of Selectmen.
The annual costs of maintaining grass are borne by the town. This is the only place where we're being asked to bear a share of the cost of maintenance. You're exactly right.
So anyway, that's just, I don't know how worked up we should get about that, because honestly, the Guilford students get a lot of use out of it, and so I don't want to act like, town's it's another sovereign entity or something. There we are, all part of the same community. But I think we do have to talk about. These are good questions. If we're funding it 50%, who controls what goes in?
What material?
Right. And actually, I don't know, and I hate to put rumors out there, but I remember at the time when we put in the new turf field that one of the benefits of that was that the product that they were using may be less to replace. So it might be something that, even with that new carpet or springboard or whatever we need, that maybe it's more cost effective now or long term. So certainly something to explore. But.
Other questions? I obviously want to note the the special ed outplacement tuition line, and I think it's important to emphasize that it's not just saving money, but as you mentioned, the services are improved. There is, to be fair, but there is an increase in the salary line because we have more professional teachers in a district. And this is, I know, a question we get from the Board of Finance every year. If there has been some reduction in enrollment, why hasn't there been a one-to-one or whatever the ratio would be, reduction in staffing? One reason is because as the tuition outplacement line has gone down, it has gone down not because you can't just move somebody from a tuition outplacement into regular education. That's
correct.
Just not only illegal, but bad educational policy. So there have been staffing increases. And I think it's important to highlight that. We're not suggesting that the budget ought to be balanced on the back of special education parents.
Exactly right. And when we show that slide, we're very careful to identify just 3 specific cost areas. The other reason for being really careful there is that it is an artificial exercise to try to separate out which staff members work with our special education students and which staff members work with students who don't necessarily have special education needs. There's a huge gray area there. And we have special education teachers who, through co-teaching, work with students who do not carry special education identifying labels. We have school social workers, counselors, psychologists who work with students who both fall into the special ed side of our program and students who do not. And so we specifically pull staffing out. But yes, we have made investments physically in the buildings and in staffing to be able to provide those services to the students. We've seen those 3 areas come down, or we've avoided costs in those 3 areas. We've recognized cost increases in special ed teaching positions and administrative positions over the last years. That's exactly right.
Other areas we'd like to ask the administration to be able to explore before we continue our
ask one question.
Sure.
With the decision to elect for more support at the elementary level for music versus art. I understand there was a longer history apparently from the community, but was there anything else that backed up that decision? Or
Yeah, so several pieces, and specifically and most significantly for me, it was conversations with the 4 elementary principals. Again, when we looked at the recommended contact time and what we were experiencing, we were short in both, but we were kind of short by half in music and only short by a quarter in art. So if we had a need, music was that greater need at this time. And to some degree, part of it had to do with the way that I heard the concerns being brought forward. When we met with the leadership team, they were talking about contact time in music and the importance and the benefit of having more contact time in music. Many of the concerns that I heard raised around art sounded like scheduling concerns. And in fact, I heard people talking about full-time staffing in art, less than talking about the innate benefit of more art experience for students. And so if it's a scheduling concern, then I want to spend more time working with the principals and looking at how we schedule. Back to that budget assumption. Is this something that we can make improvements in without having to ask for additional staffing before going and asking for the additional staffing? I have been lobbied by music parents and staff members every single year for the last 6 years, and so we haven't found a correction there. I think it's time to ask for the increased staffing. Honestly, the principals will tell you they'd like both this year. I'm just not going to bring that forward at one time, not to mention because of the cost, but because you want to make changes to a building schedule like that incrementally. It was a forced choice. We had to choose one. Those are the reasons that we leaned toward music. I'd be happy to be standing here next year or the year after asking for art staffing as well.
Could I ask a somewhat related question? You're talking about 2 music teachers. Would it be possible to do 1 art and 1 music?
No, and we looked at that and we anticipated that question. It's because of the way we schedule, and so we're currently at approximately a part-time music teacher at each of our 4 elementary schools. To make a full-time position at each of those schools would afford us the opportunity to double that contact time. To add a quarter of a position to each of those buildings spread across 5 grade levels wouldn't give the principals the ability to schedule it effectively, and you couldn't increase by 15 minutes a day in each. It's really got to be one or the other because of the demands of the schedule. So again, I'd love to be back here in a year or 2 asking for the second half of this.
Just out of curiosity, are those positions difficult to hire for music at elementary level?
Not as easy as some. They're not as plentiful as elementary classroom teachers, but they're not the same shortage area challenge that we would see in world language, math, or science. They're sort of, they're in that middle area there. We have had some incredibly exciting hires in the music department in the last couple of years. There is some talent available. And again, I say this sort of proudly, we also have the opportunity to hire away. Guilford is a destination school district, and so we will have the opportunity to draw some folks who may live closer to us or would be excited about working in our school system because of what we can offer professionals who come and join us. So I don't anticipate those being difficult hires.
Other questions for this evening? I have one of Ms. Trudeau, which was look up we are expecting the final state grant application to be submitted. Does that affect the bonding schedule that we already have from the town in any way? In other words, how are the anticipated state grants balanced into the bonding schedule? And I don't expect you to know the answer sitting here, because that all goes through the town side anyway, but I think we ought to know that as we look at the bonding proposals. Sure. Okay, thanks. Mr. Bagley?
Now, I was just wondering what impact or possible impact might the revenue reduction from the state have on our budget? Will it have any impact at all?
In the budget that I present to you, not directly, because the ECS funds go from the state to the town. And in my simple estimation, the town had accommodated for the reductions appropriately last year. So I believe that the town has already appropriately reduced any revenue that they were expecting from the state. In my mind, it's not something that we need to address directly in our budget. The town planned and afforded us an uninterrupted year this year, and the level to which they reduced seems to be appropriate moving forward. They might want to make some minor adjustments to some other grant lines coming into the town from the state, but I believe ECS is pretty on target.
Well, and the special ed excess cost grant.
Correct.
I think is in the second year of the biennial budget that the General Assembly adopted 2 months ago for next year. I think that was maintained at roughly the level that we anticipated.
Yeah,
so
we're not expecting big reductions there.
There was, I don't know if you noticed, there was an article today that the Connecticut's income tax receipts were about $700 million greater than they anticipated, but it's a one-time. It's a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Well, or people were selling stocks at the end of the year or something like that. But in any event, I don't know. It's by statute. It has to go into the so-called rainy day fund.
Rainy day fund.
I don't know whatever.
But they
I understand
on a regular basis.
They have done that for years, of course. But I don't know what that means for us. And is the bottom.
It won't change our presentation here, but I do think it's worth noting that the teachers that I have referenced, the folks on whom we build this budget every year and the folks on whom our successes are built, they are recognizing the tax increase this year because the teacher's share of their pension has increased by a percentage point this year.
True.
So teachers completely outside their negotiations with us, with this local school district, will be paying a greater share of their own pensions this year than they were required to in the past. So part of that state solution, I won't say it was done on the backs of teachers, but it will come out of the pockets of our teachers to a degree.
Okay. What else would we like to talk about tonight with this?
And again, I'll just remind everybody that if there are questions or ideas that come into your head between the time that we adjourn tonight and the next time we meet, just send them to me. Jason and Linda and I will make sure that we have those answers, and we'll be prepared to have those discussions with you when we meet next.
Great. So is your proposed, well, and I want to say two things. One is you're going to get this proposed budget on your website by
before the end of this week. It'll be up.
And I just want to highlight this. I think all of us feel that the administration and the staff have done a great job putting this together. I'm sure you won't be offended if there are changes to the proposal. There have been every year. I think we recognize the amount of work that's gone into this, but there may be some areas that we just weigh differently.
It gets better through the public process. We look forward to those deliberations with you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
Actually, I'd just like to acknowledge appreciation to the teachers doing their due diligence in maintaining costs.
The teachers and the principals have done really well in that area. Thank you. I'll share that. Thank you all for the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so where were we? We were up to the board report. Personnel item 9.1. We're on the board agenda. There is a request that we ratify the appointment of a social worker at Lindsay Mapes at Adams and Baldwin, a .6 FTE, effective this week. Is there a motion to ratify that appointment?
So moved.
Second?
Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. 9.2, speaking of contracts, we have been negotiating for some months with the paraprofessional and clerical union. Ms. Sullivan and Dr. Balistraci, I think, were in charge of the negotiations on behalf of the Board of Education, and I understand that there is a recommended agreement.
That is correct. I think Ms. Sullivan's going to...
There is. And please, Jason and Linda, either stop me or correct me if my short-term memory fails. But you're correct. We did spend a good amount of time going back and forth with this bargaining unit, and we did ultimately come to a mutually agreeable contract that's 3 years. And we did clean up a lot of language. I won't go into all the details unless people have specific questions. But this group is already in the high deductible health plan. They were our first group, I think, to go, so they will remain in that plan. Some of the changes we made to the plan are their contribution percentages each year. They go up slightly each year for the 3 years. The rest of it mostly stayed the same in terms of their deductibles. We did change and put in some language about the disbursement of what the board contributes to the deductible every year. Instead of giving it half and half, we do a quarter at a time in the early part of the contract, just to make sure that we put our money in the best spot in terms of retirements. And that's pretty much it. Is there anything missing in that? And then the next part that we spent the majority of the time on was salaries. We did a lot of work, and by we, I mean Linda did a lot of work correcting what is pretty messy step schedule in salaries that didn't make a lot of sense anymore and was confusing and really wasn't helping anybody. So Linda did a lot of work to clean that up. And we ultimately, I asked you for the exact amounts. That's fine. We have 3 years, and we tried to come up with sort of an even percent increase each year, and it's not exactly even every year is my recollection, but it overall evens out to
6.75 over 3 years, 2.25 each year.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is some, in the first year, there's some step correction, and in the third year, there's some step correction. And hopefully that'll put us in a better position 3 years from now. That's kind of it.
It does allow some employees who have been frozen on the same step for multiple years, for many years, to finally see step movement, so we are excited about that.
Right. So there were previously, I believe, just three steps. As Amy said, Linda worked really hard to expand that, and we worked with the union to do that as well. So we were able to kind of combine 3 years of some movement and then wage increases to try to even that all out.
And did you mention that agreement was ultimately reached with the help of a mediator?
Correct.
We did go to mediation.
Yes.
Okay, well, everybody's got the red line version of
Yes.
the contract and
So
the
if
clean
there's not
version
any
of
other
the contract.
questions?
Any other questions? And are you moving that we accept
am.
this? Okay, is there a second?
I will second that, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? I want to thank both of you on behalf of the board. I know this was the last agreement, and it got to the mediation stage just before arbitration. I know you both spent a lot of, and along with Linda and Mr. Bowden, and I'm sure others.
Yes, I would like to mention
Yes.
Sue Renner,
Yep.
who is no longer
yes.
with us on the
Yes.
board, was our third Board of Ed member who put in a good amount of time here as well.
All right, then all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. 9.4 is just receive for possible action the bids that we received on the bus transportation. We did talk about this in some detail in the Operations Committee. Maybe I should do, Ms. Cohen, do you want to talk about what the results were?
Yeah. So basically, there were 5 companies that showed up for the transportation bid, and we received 2 bids back from our current transportation company as well as one other. And it's going to result in about a 2% increase, 2.5% increase, as Dr. Freeman alluded to in his budget presentation. So
20.
That's about 20%
I'm sorry.
increase, yeah.
Thank you.
It was so much better when it was
2%, 20%. Thank you. So, we discussed this a bit in our operations meeting about how we want to proceed. I would like a better understanding of why 2 transportation companies bid when 5 showed up to the initial meeting. It would be great to have a greater understanding of that. And there was some discussion about whether we could go back out to bid and decline the current bids that came through.
We believe we have some due diligence that we still need to complete on both of the bidders, and so we're not prepared to make a recommendation tonight about which to award or whether to award at all at this point. So we'd appreciate a little more time to look further into these bids.
Okay. I mean, I don't think this is a shock to us that this was going to change. I mean,
Right, we knew there was an increase.
We did negotiate a very, very favorable contract last time with our current provider. I think we have to see whether there are alternatives. Can I ask a question, though? On the budget book, the transportation page, what are we comparing? The regular buses line, which last year was the $1,824,000. On the bids that came in, how did these numbers compare to that number? In other words, what are are there different components of that line?
Yes, there's different components. The amount that's in the budget includes all components of the transportation. I did use the rates that were submitted as the bid with the flat 20%. That was my original estimate of where I thought we were going to be. I have not adjusted it to one of these bids specifically.
Okay, so what's in your budget book is close to the bids that came in. Okay, all right, all right, so it could be worse.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, it fell within the range that we were expecting and that we had planned for. Wasn't an exact hit, but it was pretty close.
Okay. No. All right. Okay, so in the absence of a motion to accept either one of these bids this evening, I think we'll just carry that forward. Maybe we can always act on that at one of the budget meetings if we put it on the agenda. So that would be, depending on what kind of information
I think we need some more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some more data.
Yeah. And I did ask Dr. Freeman, by the way, to email the 2 bids that did come in to all of the board members tomorrow, so you can actually take a look at them. Good. Okay. Committee reports, item 10, Policy Committee. What's going on?
The Policy Committee did not meet last month, did we? Oh,
Yeah, we did meet.
Sorry.
We met at the Board of Finance meeting.
Holidays and snow days, and I don't know which end is up. We did, in fact, meet. So we are looking at a particular policy and regulation regarding sexual abuse, education, training, and response within the school system, recognizing that we do have a child abuse reporting and prevention kind of policy and reg in the district already and have for some time. And also that we have had policies around addressing sexual abuse and education and are simply updating that policy with the most recent legislation. So one of the things the Policy Committee did in December is look further into how we incorporate this new kind of policy and address it and embed at least the reporting piece in with the child abuse reporting piece, because the processes are the same for both at the state level. So rather than have overly long and separate regulations for both of these policies, what we're working to do is to make sure that we identify the unique, specific issues that each of those types of abuses and training and education need to address, while remaining concise in the many places, particularly in the reporting where they overlap.
Okay.
So,
All right. Any comments, questions? Okay. Operations Committee, anything else?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning, I mean, obviously we talked about the budget and the transportation, but I do think it's worth mentioning that Erica, the Guilford Schools Dining Services, together with before and after school care, are having another community dinner on Thursday, January 11th, from 6 to 8 p.m. here. So everybody in the community is invited and can purchase tickets right at the door. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also think it's worth noting that Mr. Gurnham reported out on this last week of intense cold and the efforts that have been made. We have run into some heating concerns at a few of the buildings. We've had to move some students out of some classrooms because of frozen pipes. We've had a few burst pipes, but I really want to commend our custodial crew, our maintenance crew, and Mr. Gurnham for all the work that they have put into maintaining these buildings through this unprecedented cold snap. And I want to thank all of the teachers and parents and students for their tolerance as we have worked through these cold temperatures. I'm glad it's warming up.
We should also thank Catherine Walker for her flexibility since her office was severely affected.
Her sense of humor.
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, I guess we should, that's the first snowfall with the new, real snowfall with the new snow contract, snow plowing contract. Any comments, thoughts, observations about?
I didn't get any feedback from Mr. Gurnham that was at all negative. They were out working, clearing. They were responsive to the questions and concerns that we had throughout the past couple of days, so we're off to a good start.
Yeah, they were able to meet all our needs as well as the needs of the Park and Rec folks who use the buildings. We've been working really closely, particularly with Basketball Association, and our local crew as well as the outside group we contract with have been very responsive so far. And since this is the last snow of the season, it was a good year.
Good. That's going to be in your performance report.
Item 9.
So as of today, the last day of school is June 15th.
Which is also then graduation.
It's a Friday.
Friday. Which would be great if it holds.
Yeah.
If it holds, it would be great.
Yeah.
Well, we know now that it will.
Right. Sure does.
Okay. Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee.
We meet for the first time this school year, Monday, the 22nd, prior to our first public forum at Adams.
Okay. Great. Town Committee liaisons, anything going on? Pension Committee or anybody else? I know.
Land acquisition was snowed out Thursday night.
All right. And the Learn Board of Directors liaison, I don't think anybody went to the December meeting. I'd suggest that maybe you send out an email a week before those meetings just to remind people about it.
Yeah, and then we could rotate. We decided we could rotate.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. All right. There are public questions. Anybody have a question or a comment? Okay. And with nothing further, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. No executive session.
No executive session.
All right. Please drive carefully.
That'll be fun.